As you know, the theme of this week is consecration to the heart of Jesus and Mary. What I'd like to do just for a few minutes, and then I'll give it over to Bishop Zaidan, and then we'll give it over to you to ask questions and to tell us from your heart. I don't want this to be something up here. I'd like you to move down a little bit to the middle of your person and encounter Christ. And let me just give one particular story of Christ. I've given some of these stories before, but I'm not making these things up. So, Jesus is there in the midst of the scribes and the Pharisees. And as you know, it was the scribes and the Pharisees. They're kind of like the mutawa. Is that? Mutawa. The religious police. In the Islamic tradition, thank God there's no police force in the Catholic Church. The only police force in the Catholic Church is the priests. And if they find you doing something wrong, and you confess what you've done wrong, instead of putting you in prison or handcuffing you, they set you free by their right hand. That's the beauty of the Catholic faith. The police force, the only police force of the Catholic Church, are the priests. And when you turn yourself in, instead of jailing you, they set you free. Where did they get that from? Where did they get that from? This is Abir Nami practicing for tonight. I hope all of you can come tonight at 8 o'clock. 9 o'clock, sorry. 9 o'clock. You will not encounter something as beautiful as with Abir Nami. So getting back to the police force. That police force of the Catholic Church comes from Jesus himself. So in front of the scribes and the Pharisees, which were the police force of that day, making sure everybody's religious, everybody's doing the right thing. In the midst of them, there was a woman caught in adultery that was put before Jesus. Where was the man, right? But they caught the woman. And as they threw the woman in front of Jesus, they said, Master, kind of ridiculing him, Master. They didn't want a master over themselves, no more than they wanted to have a God who would tell them what to do or what not to do. They had their law. They had their rules, and they wanted to live by them. And they wanted everybody to live by them. So they caught a woman in adultery. They threw her in front of Jesus. And they said to him, Lord, Master, Moses told us from the law that anyone caught in adultery should be stoned to death. And Jesus very wisely didn't answer them. He bent down to the ground and he began writing with his finger on the ground. Nobody knows exactly what he was writing, but he began writing with his finger on the ground. Now, believe me, Jesus was a man of the law. He was a man of God and a man who wanted to live by the rule of God. And he stood up, and they said, Master, don't you have an answer for us? He then once again bent down on the ground and began writing with his finger. And then he looked up and stood up, and they said, Master, don't you have any teaching for us? He said, yes. Whoever is free from sin, let him throw the first stone. By the way, this chapter 8 of St. John's Gospel almost didn't make it in the Gospel of John. It seems like some church fathers were afraid. If people read that, they would think that anything goes. And so they took that out of the Gospel. In some versions of St. John's Gospel, courageously, some other scholars and bishops and priests made sure that that passage of St. John's Gospel was not missing. And when he said, "Let him who is without sin throw the first stone," they began to walk away from the elders to the youngest. Elders, of course, the older we get, the more sins we have. They began to walk away from the elders to the youngest. And then, after a while, he was left face to face with the woman. And he said to her, "Woman, where are your accusers? Is there no one here to accuse you?" And she said to him, "No, sir, there is no one here to accuse you." And then he said this, "Nor do I condemn you. But from now on, go in peace and avoid this sin." I tell you this story, and I can tell you 20 stories about the heart of Jesus, so that once we come close, as St. John the Apostle did, if you see the pictures of the Last Supper, there's one man who's got his ear resting on the heart of Jesus. Maybe he just loved that heart so much he wanted to hear it himself, just to listen. And it is this heart of Jesus that we're going to be talking about this week. And the heart of Jesus came from Mary. And so that's why this week we have what's called the consecration of ourselves to the heart of Jesus and the heart of Mary. And thank you. I have one more duty. Yes, sister.
Could you just explain what consecration means, just for the benefit of those?
Consecration means that we offer ourselves completely in a sacrifice, in an offering, to be like someone, to be like Christ, to be like his Sacred Heart, to be like his mother, whose sinless heart, who put Jesus in, gave Jesus to us through the world. So consecration means we set aside everything else, all the important things in life, we set them aside, and we make sure that we know, and of course God knows, that our lives are for Christ. Our lives are for his Sacred Heart. And it's through Mary that we focus on the heart of Jesus. So consecration is a conscious, deliberate offering of self, to sacrifice, to offer ourselves, to be consecrated, to be completely God's. And so that's what this week is about. Thank you. And now I want to introduce my counterpart in the western parts of the United States, who's although he's younger, he's much better than me as a bishop. He knows what he's doing. He came well prepared. He was the parish priest in Los Angeles for many years, as well as the parish priest in San Antonio. And he's a beautiful man, a beautiful bishop. So please give your attention to Bishop Zaidan.
But remember, he's the senior bishop. Thank you, Bishop Gregory. I think you said a lot. I just want to pick it up from where you left. Look at the heart. What is the heart from a biological point of view? It's really the center of the blood circulation. That's what gives life and to all our bodies. The minute the heart stops, we're dead. From that perspective, in a Christian perspective, the same thing as well. And sometimes when I used to see John, head and ears on the chest and the heart of Jesus, I would say, is he heart a doctor? He's checking the heart of Jesus to see this is the last night. But he was going to really grasp as much life from that heart. And for us to really live out, we need to get closer to the heart of Jesus. In the Old Testament, the heart summarizes the human being. They say, son, give me your heart. That means give me yourself, all of yourself. And that's the key. The heart was a summary of the being as a human being. In our own heart, check how your heart is beating. And it goes through variation of things. When we're so excited, it's going. When we're depressed, there is chest pain and all the different things of the heart. What's your heart is made of? What goes through your heart? What feeling, what thoughts, what goes through your heart? And trying to see, how do you want to be described yourself? Sometimes, what's our legacy going to be? How do we want to be described? How do we want to be remembered one day? Our heart, if we are in the presence of the loved one, is filled with love for that person, our fiancé, the person we're going to share life with, our lover. If it comes to the parents, we have a special type of heart. If we see an enemy, that heart would be the opposite. We have different situations of the heart. But you know something? The heart of Jesus is constant, is always loving, is always forgiving. We have the different types of scenarios and different feelings in the heart. But God is the same. The only thing He's lamenting us when we are away, He wants us to come in. He wants to come closer. He wants to really put Him in our hearts. In the Gospel of John, He said, really, the Father, anyone who loves and does the will of my God, the Father and I would love him and will come and have a dwelling in the heart. In the book of Revelation in chapter 3 and the letter to Laodicea, he would say, I will knock at the door. If you open the door of your heart, I will come in. And that's what today I think Christ is knocking at your door, at your heart. Do you hear him as you hear the beat of your heart? I hope it's beating your heart. I don't know what kind of beating we have tonight. I hope we'll be good, loving one. And see what our heart is telling us. And I'm sure if we get closer to God, closer to the Blessed Mary, we'll be all filled with love, filled with all good things in a beautiful way. And here you are.